Just a reminder, we are recording this session. The press is not with us, but some portions of this may be used publicly in the future, and I think everyone was informed of that. Catherine Goldman, our Bellevue City Council Chair, is serving as our technical assistant today, our engineer, and our goal is to end about 11:50. So what I first wanted to do was just introductions. Michelle, you want to wave our state senator, Michelle Stennett, and Sally Toon and Muffy Davis are two representatives for District 26. And then starting in the north, Mayor Pierre Hendricks is with us. Neil Bradshaw from Ketchum had a long-standing commitment, is not with us today, but I do have a question for him if we have time from him. Mayor Martha Burke, I think, is on or almost on. Mayor Ned Post from Bellevue is with us today, as well as Randy Patterson from Cary. So welcome, everyone. What we're going to do first is, folks sometimes believe that the legislature ends at the end of March or April and everyone goes home and does their other jobs. In fact, there are meetings constantly in the interim, and especially with COVID and property tax and a lot of the issues with regard to the allocation of the CARES money. Our legislators have attended a lot of meetings. So I thought very briefly, starting with Michelle and then Sally and then Muffy, if you could give us a very brief overview, because I know you've been sending information to our mayors, just a very brief overview of some of the things that have been coming up in the committees, and then we're going to go to the questions. So we'll start with Michelle, please.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us with this. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to interface with you and get your questions. So really grateful you're joining us. I was hoping that we were going to be able to go home and social isolate and do my house projects, but that didn't happen. We did have right out of the gates, obviously a real concern here since we were the most infected per capita in the country when we returned from session. And we had to set the example for the rest of the state. And I think we all trained the governor and others while we were learning about what to do with this virus. The thing that I do commend is that we were able to silo the CARES money as it came in into various task forces that the governor put together, which addressed everything from healthcare to broadband to schools. So anything that was something that government usually oversees, particularly if it is large systems, we had to make sure that we nailed down in some fashion about how we could, as to the best of our knowledge, which is ever changing with this virus, make sure that we are able to manage that in some fashion. As you probably heard, some of the big hiccups were our unemployment, the Department of Labor. I would argue that we have too few people who are in many of our agencies and departments who trained people who in an emergency or crisis, they just are undermanned and under-resourced. And so even with the resources coming in, you had to train people because there was a lot of fraudulence. We still had 6,000 or 7,000 claims that were found to be fraudulent. We are much lower than many other states that had all kinds of mischief that happened with their unemployment services. That said, it did not roll out smoothly. You probably heard from your constituencies. I know we did. We kept trying to work with the governor. We have a call still to now. We have a call in with the governor weekly to express our concerns and hear what the state is proposing. So during this whole time, whenever we received any of this money, whether it was assistance for individuals or assistance for businesses, all of those things that we put together in links that the state site was creating as they were going and as they were funding it, we tried to send that to you. So hopefully that was helpful. In the interim, we had a lot of interim remote phone calls for our interim committees, but also some in person, which we had to try to do because we are going into a brave new world of probably a hybrid virtual in-person kind of existence. And so we need to practice that. And we, as we all know, don't have the broadband. Wendy was just talking about that. I was having a really difficult time with Verizon to keep a picture or to Zoom. It was blowing through data. Wendy says in some places, no matter what service, you are having some difficulty being able to stay on top of the work you do remotely. That is an overload, which we've put $50 million into trying to address, which is a drop in the bucket, in my opinion. But we have to make sure that we service our schools. And we know that is not a level playing field. There are, as Sally would attest to, she's down in Gooding and she's constantly getting connection unstable. So that can't make for good business and or a good school year. So we're working on that. And in the interim, we were called into a joint committee meetings to address how we're going to handle the next election process, how we're going to handle the opening of schools, and a lot of liability issues. And of course, we've been working on this property tax issue, which I know some of you have some questions about. So it has been a tremendous amount of information. We've reached out to all our commissioners and we've talked to some of our school districts, and we're trying to the best of our ability, make sure that we're always available to you. So we will answer your questions in the time constraint that we have, but always feel free to contact us. We're really grateful for the good work that you're doing. We have set a stellar example for the rest of the state. Whether they want to take that example or not is up to them. But I look forward to answering your questions and really grateful to have this moment with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. We're going to move to Sally. Michelle talked for about 5 minutes, Sally, so make sure you stay at that or a little bit under, okay?
That sounds good on there. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your, excuse me, out of your day to meet with us. I greatly appreciate it. As Senator Stennett had mentioned, life didn't stop when we ended in session. In fact, we've been busier this year than normal because we walked into the 21st century with our meetings. Right off the bat with COVID, our meetings have just been nonstop with the money coming in. As part of the CARES Act, we had to set up committees to deal with $1.2 billion coming to the state of Idaho. And we've managed to try to get it out smoothly. I can't say always, but we have had input on every piece of it, putting the money out. The committee has tried to address most issues. I was involved in some of the broadband monies that went out to the communities, and the fact that we put money into broadband. Kudos for the state of Idaho. We have a ways yet to go, but something is better than sitting and doing nothing. I've worked education nonstop. With the COVID, what education looks like is very different. I've sat on a couple of meetings. I've sat on, we still have curriculum. There was a mandate during session that we rewrite some standards. I've been on several committees I'm involved in rewriting the science standards for the state of Idaho. And it took forever to get them passed, and now we're going to rewrite them again with lots of input. So I've had several meetings on that. Because the rules didn't pass for every committee in the state, every agency, they have to review the rules. We've had to rewrite rules, and some have just passed what we passed, but we didn't pass the bill to accept them all between the House and Senate again. So several committees have had to rewrite those. I have been involved in the Department of Lands and the Department of Agriculture in the rewrite of a lot of their rules. The smoothest, probably the smoothest part, we meet next week with JFACT as a summer committee. There's some controversy on how we delegate funds through JFACT. though most of that won't come up until session. Our hiccup, as Senator Stinnett said, was probably our Department of Labor. Good share of the money coming from federal government had to be distributed through the Department of Labor and the Tax Commission, and we just weren't ready for the volume. That will have to be addressed come session again. Also, we've dealt with constituent issues nonstop. So I'll stop there. I'd love to answer questions. The property tax has been on all three of our plates. We just, we've had Attorney General opinions. We've talked to commissioners. We've talked to several cities. There's a lot of concern, but we'll try to answer your specific questions as we come through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Muffy, you wanted to talk about your role with the Judiciary and Rules Committee?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I'm sorry that we aren't all able to meet in person as we normally do, but it's definitely been an unusual year this year, and we are trying to make the best of a difficult situation. Hopefully, as both my colleagues, Sally and Michelle stated, you've been getting updates from us and the information as it comes in fast and has been constantly changing. You know, originally the governor set out his stage 4 opening plan, and that has altered and changed, and now it's more a regional management plan. But I want to let you know that we are in touch with our local health district, and we communicate with them and understand as we move forward those needs. So we're constantly talking to all our colleagues and correspondents to make sure that the best information is getting out there and decisions are being made in the best, safest way as possible. So with that, most recently, I just had a I was a part of a working group with the Judiciary and Rules, a combination of the Senate and the House Judiciary and Rules Committee. And you have probably heard that Governor Little just called a special session on August 24th, and we will be going back to the Capitol to meet. And of that is expected, what we came out with the Judiciary and Rules, we were discussing liability coverage in this time of COVID, and if we need to create some new statutes and some new legislation to cover liability. So the Judiciary and Rules Working Group did vote to pass out a specific RS to be discussed and debated in a special session, and we anticipate that the governor will probably call that session at least on that issue, if not additional issues to come up. So with that, that's really the most. My colleagues Michelle and Sally both covered a lot of the other issues that we've been discussing, but again, please don't, it's an honor to be here and share with you right now, but please don't limit it to this. If and when questions come up or concerns you have, reach out at any time. We are always there for you. And if we don't have the answer, we'll do our best to try and find it. So
great, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Let's start with you as the Mayor Hendricks, the City of Sun Valley, as the first questioner, and then we'll just move south and end up with Randy Patterson. And if we have time, then we'll go back north again. So Mayor Hendricks from Sun Valley, questions? Just two, maybe? Have you narrowed it down to two?
Wendy, I think that's the first time you've ever called me Mayor Hendricks in the many years that I've known you. So I don't know what's changed, but let's go back.
I was just trying to be more formal.
I know that. I know that. Thanks for everybody for joining. A couple of comments. Number one, I think the biggest issue that we have facing us is dealing with the virus, and it has many facets. The first one is, how do we continue to be stellar in our performance and doing all the right things? Yesterday we had a conference call with South Central Health, and we talked about many things, but most of it was, how do we continue to suppress or mitigate the spread of the virus in Blaine County, and I consider that as far as my world is concerned. Also, the biggest challenge, and Sally, this is right up your alley, it's the school situation. This is going to be extremely challenging. We're going to have to be very nimble and adroit, but in my humble opinion, we should try to get people back to school as soon and as often as we possibly can. Along those same lines, I'm not a social media person, and I have noticed a few communications from the state legislatures, the people I'm looking at right now, over the last couple of months, and maybe I all missed it. I didn't think I missed out on an awful lot, but I sometimes wondered what your opinions were on certain things that were going on in the Valley. As I said, I'm not involved in social media, but I know you all have emails of my addresses and certainly my council and my staff. So I wonder about that. Let's see, the property tax issue. As you probably know, Sun Valley has not taken the statutory increase of 3% over the last 9 years. So it was easy to make a decision to apply for the CARES Act funding as far as public safety, payroll, and things like that. And we were awarded, I think, $856,000 or so. We still have questions about how that will show up in a tax bill. Is the county going to be tasked with that order to send out all of the rebate checks, if that's what it is, or is there going to be a note on the tax bill that there is a rebate coming and here's the amount of it? What else did I have here? Hold on, let me grab my notes.
How do we coordinate? Well, you were talking about social media. Oh, your comprehensive plan?
Oh, yeah. So the last discussions that we have had among the elected officials and the people that have been calling in and sending us emails, this seems to be in the city of Sun Valley almost a sea change. We always had expected to see an influx of second homeowners and an influx of visitors come here. Anecdotally, we're hearing from real estate agents that the activity and looking for lots and houses is unprecedented. Just yesterday, I asked one of them, I said, okay, that's a lot of smoke, but are they actually closing? And the answer is yes, they are closing. So I wonder if we are not going to have a complete change in what we have termed over the many, many years as slack. Maybe slack is something of the past. We're seeing now on our bike paths and our hikers, not groups of 2s and 3s. We're seeing packs of 6 to 10 bicyclists and hikers, and good for them, and they're all acting well. And that's why I go back to this. Our numbers are so good and so terrific that it's so encouraging to do. But I wonder if these people after September 15th, let's say, are they going to go back to where they came from, or are they going to say, this is such a wonderful place, we're moving here and we're going to stay here? And so our second homeowners perhaps could be full-time citizens. You know, we have 1,158 registered voters in the city of Sun Valley. I'm going to guesstimate by the time November comes along, that number will be significantly higher. And so we need to address and perhaps revisit thoughts about our comprehensive plan. And maybe we are no longer a vacation destination resort. We're a full-time vacation place where an awful lot of people live as their primary residence.
Okay. Okay, Peter, let me go to ask Michelle. Maybe if Michelle, if you have any update with regard to the question that he had with regard to the rebate checks, the checks, any kind of comment with regard to that? That sounds like a state process issue.
What I know, it's changed around quite a bit, but this was the brainchild of Alex Mills with or Alex Adams with our Division of Financial Management, DFM. And he has convinced the governor that this was a good idea to use CARES money in order to give some relief. The difficulty we're having is we have not gotten anything written or in a surety that this is legal. When I did ask the governor, because I wanted to give some comfort and have some paper trail about how it is that they had determined that, because the governor said, I will cover this if it isn't legal, but we're assured that it's legal. And so I said, well, do we have a letter from the U.S. Treasury? And he said, no, we just talked to the administration and they said the U.S. Treasury is on board. That doesn't give a lot of the commissioners and mayors and all of Southern Idaho any comfort. And so there is a lot they did try to talk to the governor's office and to Mr. Adams. Whenever they asked the hard questions about could they have a documentation and portfolio about all of this, he basically dismissed them and hung up. That does not give real confidence, unfortunately, to the people like you who are all supposed to navigate and manage this program. So the treasurers met just yesterday and I spoke to them and they got a little more comfort on some of the logistics, but the few things that you should know is they still have no written confirmation that it's legal. There is no written confirmation that the state will in fact protect you if you take this on and somebody litigates and tries to question its legality, whether that's the feds or somebody else. There's no way then for you to be held harmless. And if the state does find out that in fact they overstepped with these CARES money to do, because it is specifically outlined, if you read it, that we're not supposed to be using it for what this program is asking for. And if the governor does step in, we all know it's not going to come from, no disrespect, but Governor Little's ranch. It's going to be coming from our taxpayers. It's going to be, again, another cut to departments and agencies. It's going to be less money coming to our local governments and jurisdictions and tax districts if we have to pay for some lawsuit because we overstepped our bounds, or they find out that it is not legal. So we are trying to work with the governor's office to make sure that before the drop dead deadline, I think September 17th or something like that, where you can back out of this as a last option if you've decided to sign on and you reconsider, that at that stage you can say, I don't have enough confidence in this, I can back out. If we can't get something in writing, something that you can use to protect yourselves, that is going to be problematic. And what I understand from the treasurers, Mayor Hendricks, is I think that it's likely to be not a cash check rebate, but probably a deduction on their tax notices if they were given some kind of break. The other part that I am not comfortable with is there's nothing in this that guarantees that the taxes will actually go down and that renters will get relief. There is no guarantee. So if we're going into this because we're looking for property tax relief, there is nothing in this in here that promises that that will actually happen.
Well, as a point of clarification, I had some concerns with this just in the structure of it, because the way it is set up, the cities who will suffer from the loss of the LOT because of this will not have one penny added to their coffers. It will be a transfer. So what I suggested in an email that said that if we forego the 3% and if you give us, let's say, our portion of the $850,000, we can use it as we see fit. And that could be a combination of anything. If we decided to give a tax property tax rebate, or we decided that we, because of this, needed more emergency personnel, we could do that. But we did not get a choice in this, so this is a pass-through. The jurisdictions who could not, because of loss of other revenues, let's say because of an LOT, could not pass on the 3% and actually needed that to keep their city running, really suffered twice in their property tax because they increased the taxes 3%, and plus the people in their jurisdiction didn't get a rebate. And I think that's a double down, and that makes me uneasy too. But in Sun Valley, we're fortunate in being able to pass on the 3% and doing this. I don't think we have experienced an explosion in the size of our yearly property tax here in Blaine County. I look at my tax bill, it goes up and down. It doesn't go anything like it happened when I lived in California, and probably not what it is happening in Ada or Canyon County. So I feel for them, but I can't really reach them.
Okay.
I just wanted to interject that the treasurers did also say that they found it completely complex and cumbersome if a city decides to take it and the county doesn't, or vice versa. And how do you split that out in jurisdictions? And that'll be a problem
with the special districts. Okay, we may be talking about this as we go further, but I want to keep moving. I did visit with Mayor Bradshaw yesterday, and as a talking point, he just wanted to remind the legislators that we should remember that during COVID, the cities and the county have been given quite a bit of leeway about how they wanted to manage the virus. And normally the state does not give our local governments, we're a very non-home rule state. And so when they start talking about not changing the Airbnb legislation, for instance, he wants you to remember that, in fact, the state did establish a precedent in allowing cities and counties to manage COVID, and why can't they manage Airbnb? So, Mayor Bradshaw, I'm going to move now to Mayor Martha Burke, and make sure you have your phones muted. I'm hearing a little bit of noise. So, Mayor Burke, would you like to go ahead with your questions?
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the conversation that we just heard from Mayor Hendricks was very high on my list of questions as well. And a follow-up to Mayor Hendricks' question about second homeowners or families moving who have already families in this area, but coming back because their school districts are not opening at all. I know of one family that I've known forever, and he is moving back with his 3 daughters and wife. They're renting a place in Elkhorn now, and they've enrolled their 2 daughters at Hemingway and their younger daughter at the Presbyterian preschool. So I'm just wondering how much of this we're going to see and the effect it will have on our school district that we have not prepared for. And so I have a lot of questions regarding how the school district will open classes. Do we have substitute teachers? So I know that this is an individual Blaine County issue, but it is one that's piquing my interest. The other comment I would like to know, how can we get some help from the state to move toward a more resilient, sustainable approach to commerce, agriculture? You know, I'm talking climate change, and I think it will affect areas like ours if we do not have snow, or if we have boatloads, or I don't know. I'm curious about the overall put forward regarding climate change.
I'm going to go to Sally and ask Sally just to give us any kind of updates that she may have with regard to the Blaine schools, and if there's $99 million being replaced by JFAC with the CARES money. It's kind of out there. And then Sally, could you talk about whether you've heard or in your JFAC summer meeting that you're going to have, if climate change is going to be addressed at all? Those two things. Sally?
Thank you. I'll get into the education. It's really, and I'm glad to see it's a local control issue. There is money coming in from the CARES Act for schools, but it's going to end up being a replacement. The governor has asked for the 21-22 school year that schools reduce 5% of their budgets. They're not worried about it a whole lot because the CARES Act is going to give them $91 million to replace $99 million. It's going to be kind of a push, but it's about some transportation. We have not gotten a whole lot of guidance. They've punted it to the local health districts for the schools. Every school district, how do you not let school districts open, such as in Arco or Camas County that have limited number of cases? We have school districts in Twin that are looking for lots of teachers that have made online an option within the schools. We have schools that can't get kids enrolled because parents just aren't going to send them when they do open them. What do you do for the school funding? There are lots of questions still to be asked. The superintendents are nervous because of liability. We have limited liability that says because we were in emergency, we're not going to cover if somebody sues the school districts. That issue is what's being the special session on. So funding for school for this year, I think will be okay. The Office of Emergency Management has put supplies in for schools. They've all requested them. The issue is going to become how do we handle it when there is a case diagnosed in the schools. South Central Health District is trying to give guidance, but they just recently had a meeting on the mandated mask wearing, and even the board in South Central Health District can't come to an agreement. So it really has been punted to the local level and the local boards.
Sally, do you want to?
It will be interesting in 2 weeks.
Sally, is JFAC talking at all about climate change on your summer meeting that you're having next week or tomorrow, whenever it is?
We meet on Tuesday, and no, we are not talking about it. The only thing on the agenda is non-cognizable funds from the CARES Act that the governor didn't have a right to spend them.
Okay.
That's the only thing on our agenda.
Okay. So, Muffy, do you want to just give a brief outline of you talked about an RS, which is the proposed bill for liability. Are the schools exempt from that liability? What about what Michelle talked about with regard to, and what Mayor Hendricks talked about, this liability in the future if the property tax is taken, the replacement? Did you have a conversation about that?
We did not talk about the property tax or any of that. So that is still up in the air and we don't know. There are proposals perhaps regarding the schools are not exempt this RS, what it will do is, and the one that was passed out, we had 2 that came through our committee. The minority party voted, most of us voted against it. There was another RS that did not get passed through. The one that got passed out, which I believe in our special session will be able to be amended, hopefully, because it was very broad. And it is our belief that a special session and an emergency is not the time to be doing broad, all-encompassing legislation. What this RS did is it limited the liability anytime a state of emergency is called. Now, the state of Idaho has been called into a state of emergencies at least once every 2 years for the last 30 years, which would then enact this statute. We don't feel that has not been needed before. What we need right now is very limited in scope, focused on COVID-19 liability release or liability issues that are dealt with that in scope. Teachers are protected currently, and what we tried to do in this RS is make sure that it stated that workers' comp is not violated or given up through this liability. So teachers would still be protected under their workers' comp. The issue might be who's going to pay for, like as Representative Kuhn said, who's going to pay if you're brought into, or Senator Senate, I can't remember, I'm sorry, if a lawsuit is filed, who's going to cover that? And some of the insurance companies said, we're not going to cover that. So that's where that liability that is brought forward that we will talk about is they're exempted. If it is a focus on COVID-19, that's what we hope we will pass. We will see. The current one, RS, that was put forward encompasses any and all emergencies. So we will see what happens and what comes out in the special session. But I would like to talk a little bit about Mayor Burke's question about environment and what we can do. And Congress just signed into law the Great American Outdoors Act, which is the most comprehensive amount of funding that has gone to our outdoors and our public lands and things. And Representative Simpson was a co-signer on that. And I think it's a wonderful thing that was brought up, that perhaps this next year we can do a resolution in the legislature talking about how wonderful that is and that we support it. And there are a lot that can be done. I mean, there's a lot of proactive. Whether it can actually get through our legislature is the hard part. Currently right now, there's no incentivization for conservation for people that have hybrids or e-vehicles pay double registration fees. Now that's so there are a lot of different legislation and bills that we can bring forward. A wonderful one through the Hawaii was, and I'm not 100% sure if it was passed, it was just introduced this legislative session, and it starts at home, is in terms of energy codes and energy efficiency, is requiring the state buildings that are 10,000 square feet or higher to enact higher codes and to start doing that. And it was a great way to get employment back after COVID and start stimulating the economy. It's a bill that we could potentially look at introducing this next legislative session, and us at the state level work and starting to do. So we'll see what comes, but it's definitely always been a priority of ours, as you all know, to work on that. It's just what can we get through our legislature.
Okay, thank you, Muffy. Mayor Post, you have a question. Would you like to go forward?
First of all, I don't know who this Mayor Post is, Wendy. What's the story down there? Come on.
Ned, I do this all the time. I know a fellow named Ned Post, and I always call you Ned Post when you're really Ned Burns, and I apologize.
You should, but apology accepted.
Did I do it more than just now?
Yeah, you did it at the introduction.
Oh my, I can't believe it. In your moment.
I've got 2 questions. I think they're probably both more in Sally's wheelhouse than anybody's, but Sally, are you hearing anybody from JFAC? Any interest from anybody on JFAC to provide additional funding for public health districts? And then sort of follow up to that, is there any interest in changing the organizational structure of public health districts as they currently stand?
Thanks, Ned, for the question. And the answer is, probably not. The last 2 years being on JFAC, public health districts, we have struggled to fund. They want to just spread them thinner and thinner and put more and more issues under public health. without increasing their funding. Right now, public health districts are reorganizing because they've had to figure out tracing and whatnot. Unfortunately, there's not a lot from the CARES Act that went to them. They are considered a local entity because on their boards are every county commissioner is appointed to their board or an appointee, and they are considered local control because you have commissioners sitting on those boards. Unfortunately, as you know, those boards, opinions don't ever agree. South Central Health District, they put a resolution out for masks, but 6 of the 8 voted just to leave it as a resolution. It didn't apply to them. It is very difficult to get them necessarily to move in one direction. That's the nature of Idaho. To move faster is not their nature. Unfortunately, you know, they lack the ability from the state to do an enforcement. They just make recommendations. They don't enforce anything. Early on, we had trouble. They would say, we make recommendations. Okay, what if somebody doesn't follow those recommendations? There is no enforcement. And I imagine we'll see that come legislative session. Several people are very disgruntled with how that looks. But at the same time, we know the problems we run into that would have to come through health and welfare. And health and welfare is a very diverse committee on both sides. So unfortunately, I wished I could say there is more money, but we've struggled to keep there what we have. We now have behavioral health that has become a huge issue. There was just a task force started from the governor. And so I'd like to say more money. We fight for it all the time. So
Okay.
unfortunately, I can't say.
Wendy, can I
Yes.
interject just real quick with Mayor Burns? One of the glaringly obvious, shocking things about having made us all come to special session and go and meet with all of the committees that actually did convene, the big elephant in the room is they refused to bring health and welfare to talk about COVID issues and funding and public health or anything else. That is the one committee they did not convene, and it will not be talked about at special session, which just is dumbfounding to me. But that they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about elections. They want to talk about, you know, the liability. They want to talk about education, but they don't want to talk about healthcare.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Mayor Burns, do you have an additional question?
No, I'm okay, Wendy, thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, sounds good. Mayor Patterson from Cary, can you put forth your question? Mayor Patterson? Mayor Patterson, I think you're on, right? No?
Hi, all. It's Catherine. I see Randy tried to. Mayor
His
Patterson.
microphone is on and off, but I didn't see, I don't hear him.
I can't hear him. Yeah, but I can see he's unmuted. Maybe give him 1 second. Let's just give him a second. Mayor Patterson, are you there?
If we can't hear him, could he type his question in chat?
I think he's on a phone.
Yeah, and he's unmuted, but I don't. Darn it.
Okay, well, it's 11:52 right now, and we were going to wrap up. What I'd like to do is just go back. Mayor Postuse indicated you had no other questions at this moment.
Wendy.
Oh, I did it.
Hey, Ned, I think she's trying to tell you something.
I think she's probably going to try and run this Ned Post against me, I think is what her intent is.
Okay, so Mayor Burns from Bellevue, do you have any additional questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Mayor Burke from Haley, do you have a follow-up question that you'd like to put forth? Okay. Mayor Hendricks from Sun Valley, do you have an additional question that you'd like to put forth?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
And I'm going to try Mayor Patterson from Cary one more time to see if he's with us. And I don't think he is. So with that, I will wrap up. Thanks, everybody.